long-distance relationships. Thanks. Yes, I do think they are necessary, as is a don't ask, don't tell agreement. Can you talk a little bit about the polyamory movement? How extensive is this in the US and the world? Do these relationships endure? Do these relationships endure is not the standard by which we judge monogamous relationships. Is it? Half of all marriages end in divorce. Most of those marriages are monogamous, in theory, if not in practice. The problem is, people want to find a cause, and so if they know somebody who's in an open relationship and that relationship ends, they go, oh, well, of course, there's an open relationship. If they know somebody who's in a closed relationship and it ends, they go, well, what went wrong? Oh, the drinking, the work, the stress, school, long distance, kids. They'll find a million other reasons. Maybe there was cheating. Maybe it actually wasn't non-monogamous that did it. You just don't know. That said, and this is where the polyamory people hate me, I've been to a couple of polyamorous weddings, but I've never been to a polyamorous third anniversary party. So what do I think of the polyamory movement? I believe that it's hard enough to get two people who are simpatico, who've carved grooves into each other that are deep enough that they can really relax and be set together. And you add a third person to that universe, or a fourth person, and it can get really complicated. The polyamorous relationships that I've seen work, as opposed to what my husband and I have, which is, the occasional share, the ones I've seen work is where there really is a couple, there really is a partner bond, there really is a primary relationship. And then there are others who enter that orbit where there are loving relationships that last for a time, and then that third person or that second couple moves on, drifts away, and the primary couple endures. The ones that I've seen that haven't worked, in my experience, just 20 years of living in Seattle and knowing lots of polyamorous people in Seattle, the ones that doesn't work is where you end up with 3 or 4 or 5 people negotiating complete equality in this amoeba relationship. And those tend to break down or not last. How has the It Gets Better movement changed your life? I've gotten to meet lots of really fascinating people all over the country that I didn't know before. It didn't really change my life. It's made me feel really good about the reach and the impact of my column and what I was able to leverage out of it for queer kids. And, pardon me. The press on It Gets Better now is that there's well over 10,000 videos. They've been viewed more than 40 million times. There's It Gets Better projects in Latin America, South Africa, Australia, the United Kingdom. There's one launching in Israel. And we've saved, even if there were only 100 videos, what's really the ultimate achievement is that it's saved lives. We know for a fact that the It Gets Better project has saved the lives of LGBT teenagers. We've heard from them, we've heard from their parents, we've heard from kids. Some of the stories are completely heartbreaking. If there were 20 videos and we saved a life, the project would be a success. That so many people wanted to jump in and do something, and we saved lives, just makes me feel so good, satisfied. I'm not ecstatic, I'm not happy. People always, dumb idiots on CNN say, are you really happy about how well it's doing? Like, no, I'd be really happy if there's no need for it. Then I would be ecstatic. I'm touched. I'm not happy that there are these kids out there who are being bullied like this. But here's the penultimate achievement of the It Gets Better project. After the lives saved, after the people that it activated and got involved in this movement to reach these kids. The deal for LGBT adults, really since Stonewall, since the late 60s, early 70s, has been this. You are ours to torture until you're 18. When you're 18, you can come out, you can move away, you can maybe have a relationship if your boss doesn't find out about it, and you can have a life if we haven't done too much damage to you. There's one thing you can't do once you're 18. You can't talk to the kids we're still torturing. In the same schools, homes, churches where you were tortured. And if you attempt to talk to those kids because you feel empathy for them, we will accuse you of being pedophiles, of recruiting, and attempting to seduce them into the gay lifestyle. Because our idea is there's no such thing as a gay child. So, do what you want, don't talk to the kids that we're still torturing. And what the It Gets Better project did was it brought that down. It destroyed that old order, that old deal. It utterly and completely, and I believe irrevocably, destroyed the idea that LGBT adults can't talk to LGBT kids, even if it means going over the heads of their parents to talk to them. LGBT kids are 4 times likelier to attempt suicide. LGBT kids whose families are hostile or reject them are 8 times likelier. Doubles the already quadrupled risk. And right-wing, batshit, fundamentalist, conservative, evangelical Christian pieces of shit like Tony Perkins and George Reckers, the advice they give to the parents of gay kids is to reject them, knowing full well that that leaves them 8 times likelier to attempt suicide. And what the It Gets Better project did is it empowered LGBT adults everywhere to talk to these kids, even if it means going over the heads of their parents, going over the heads of preachers, teachers, and speaking to them. I got a letter at Savage Love recently about the It Gets Better project from a 15-year-old girl who came out to her family, and they reacted the way Tony Perkins would have them react. They threatened to cut her off, threatened to throw her out of the house. 40% of homeless teenagers are LGBT kids who were thrown out of the house after they came out or were outed. They threatened to throw her out of the house, threatened to not let her have any contact with her siblings, the rest of her family, if she didn't get into reparative therapy, and tell them that she wasn't a lesbian. And so she told them she's not a lesbian. She told them what they wanted to hear, which is that she's a tomboy, and she was misled by the homosexual conspiracy to believe that that must mean she's a lesbian. She likes boys, always did, she was just confused. Up go the Bieber posters in her bedroom. And she wrote me to tell me that she's watching It Gets Better videos on her phone, under her covers, in her bedroom at night. And they're keeping her sane. And to go from we're not allowed to talk to these kids, and the kids who most need to hear from us are the kids whose parents are least likely to want us to talk to them. To go from we can't talk to them, we can't reach them, they're locked up in these houses. To go from we're not allowed to talk to them to we're going to talk to your kids in their beds, in the middle of the night, under the covers. In 6 months. And I want to say to these parents, whether you like it or not, and what I need to say to them is, whether you realize right now that we are doing you a favor or not. Because we are doing you a favor. And one of the things this girl said in her really touching letter was that the project and these videos didn't just give her hope that it would get better for her and for her future, but it gave her hope for her family. Because so many of the videos are by people, made by people whose families reacted the exact same way hers has reacted to the news. And their families came around. So she just doesn't have hope for herself, she has hope for her parents, that it'll get better for them. And one day they will have the relationship that so many other adult LGBT people have with their families, despite their families' initial negative reactions. And for me, that's how the It Gets Better movement changed my life. To get a letter like that from a 15-year-old girl who a year ago, didn't know that there were LGBT people out there, adults who cared about her, who wanted to help her, didn't have a shoulder to cry on. People say to me, there are straight kids who are bullied, and that's absolutely true. The difference is, I'll tell a story. Is it midnight yet? Am I supposed to let you people go? I don't know when I'm done. I called my brother Billy the week we launched the It Gets Better project, when it started to really explode. Because we went to the same middle school. He's a year and a half older than I am, and there's another sibling in between us, very Catholic. And another sibling less than a year after me, Irish quadruplets. And we went to the same middle school, and the middle school was really where I was most brutally bullied. And I called him to say, I don't want you to think that I forgot that it was worse for you at Jerome's. That you had it worse, that you got beaten up more often than I did, and more brutally than I did, and it was much, much worse for you. I remember. And he's straight. And he was a brain. He was a total, brainiac, genius, smart kid, science fiction geek. He typed his homework on an IBM Selectric in the 70s. Kids didn't do that in 6th grade. And he said something which was typically Billy, typically smart, typically insightful. He's an English professor at Northwestern University now. He said, yeah, I had it worse at school, but I had mom and dad. At the end of the day, he went home to mom and dad, and he could tell them what happened that day and get their support, get them to march down to school. He could at least have a shoulder to cry on. At the end of the day, I went home and I looked at my parents and thought, I can't trust them with this. I can't talk to them about this because of the things my dad has said about Anita Bryant and Jerry Falwell and Ronald Reagan and the gay men that he arrested today. And so I didn't, and because it would incriminate me, it would draw attention to my sexuality, which I was desperately trying to hide from my parents. And then I was dragged off to a church on Sunday where I told gay people we're going to hell. And that's the difference between the bullying straight kids face and the bullying gay kids face, is that it's round the clock for so many gay kids. Bullied at home, bullied at school, bullied at church, bullied by their peers, bullied by their parents. And that's gotta stop. Don't clap. It makes me nervous. In movies,